issue. There it is. Okay. We'll hit go live. Okay. So I'm not sure how much of that it's going to capture before, but it's all good. All right, we are live. So hello. I am Kat Udero, psychic empath and psychic wrangler. Before we see who I've wrangled into today's show, allow me to welcome you to Third Eye Salon, where in each and every show we take a deep and fresh look between the veils of reality, and today is no different. Today we're looking between the veils of the ancient ET race that we call Mantis beings, with not one but two guests, and maybe three. One of our guests is still yet to arrive, so hopefully she's okay. We're gonna find out, but let's just I'll send Miss Jenna Layden some love, and we were doing some psychic pings. So if we all send her some psychic pings, maybe she'll be like, "Oh, that was this morning! Oh my god!" She'll open up her email and join us. So before we say hello to everybody else, so let's say hello to my bestie, psychic and conscious business coach, Linda Coulter-Burge. How are you, Linda?
I am doing well. And I was thinking this morning how much I look forward to our weekend shows, because in this crazy world, talking about aliens and Mantis and all the other stuff that we talk about somehow seems sane. So I really appreciate this time that we have together, and that we can come together and just have some joy for a couple hours, and also talk about concerns and just feel some camaraderie. And with that, as a reminder on the live stream chat, if you want to ask questions, definitely post them. Do that red question mark so that I can see it if you can. If not, I'll keep my eyes open. My rule is play nice or get out. So if you can't play nice, I'll ask you, or I'll just kick you off. I may not even give you a warning. So ask questions, have great discussion. That doesn't mean we can't have discussion. I absolutely love discussion and inquiry. And yeah. So with that, make sure you hit the like, share, and subscribe so more people see this. And if you haven't, make sure your little subscribe button is black so you get notified when we have our shows. And if you can't watch it here, you can also go to our podcasts on Apple and Spotify. Thank you, everyone who's donated to Third Eye Salon and bought a coffee from us. There is a link here for us. That has helped us expand our show. And thank you for doing that. We'd love you to join our Facebook group, because the conversation always continues there, and it's always so rich. It's a loving community where you can be safe. And with that, I want to welcome Jaylene and Matthew. And if Jenna comes in, I'll say that as well. And also Jason. So welcome, everyone. I'm looking forward to this discussion, and I'm looking forward to great questions from our audience.
Nice. I got us in gallery view, just so you know. So everyone can wave.
Everybody wave.
In Brady Bunch view.
We all look at a different corner.
Yeah, I know. So let's also say hey to Jason real quick. He's a psychic medium, and he's also an artist channel that channels your ET guides for you. He didn't find his Mantis painting for today or drawing for today, but look who he's got. He's got the lady Sekhmet from our show with Barbara Jean. How are you, Jason?
Hey, I'm doing well. I'm glad we're back. I'm glad you're feeling better. I love the Mantis energy, so this show it's super exciting, and I can't wait to see kind of what comes up in the conversation. So I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. Absolutely. Well, this is the part where I normally do bios, but instead of doing bios, also I'll remind you, give us a little thumbs up. Give us some thumbs up love if you're here, excited to talk about the Mantis, and if you're excited to see either or Jaylene or Mr. Matthew again, and hopefully Jenna. Keep pinging Jenna. But
she's on another timeline.
She might be on another timeline. She might be hanging out.
On another timeline.
She could be with an actual Mantis right now. She's like, screw you guys. I'm with the real deal. As far as we know. But instead of me doing bios today, I thought it would be much more interesting to hear from our guests. So I'm going to switch us back to speaker view. And what I'm going to ask is, well, let's just start with Miss Jaylene. And Jaylene, let us know, tell us about yourself, like you're at a dinner party and we're like, Jaylene, who are you? Let us know about the work that you do, how you got started in that, and how the Mantis showed up for you and all of that.
Okay, hi everybody. So I first started working with the Mantis several years ago when I was studying a healing modality called Body Talk. And I really loved Body Talk because it is this combination of sort of Western and Eastern philosophy. It's heart, brain, mind medicine. And during that time, so I have a background in biology, molecular genetics, and worked in biotech for many years. And before that, I was at school studying a genome project for parasites. And so throughout my life, I've always been interested in DNA and science, and that's where I landed in my career. And then I took some time off, had time to expand and study other modalities. So I'm studying this modality called Body Talk, and during that, I would go down into the earth before every session to ground myself. And this is where I met the Mantis. So I would go down into the earth and I started to see myself in this chamber. And then eventually I started to see a table and beings standing around it, one in particular at the head of the table. And she became my main Mantis guide. And I actually at first didn't realize that they were Mantis, but later on discovered that that's what they are. I had lots of confirmations along the way from other friends that I would work on who were also psychics, and they would ask who the large 9-foot being in the room was. And I said, oh, you can see her too. Okay. The most loving, amazing, healing energy. And they've taught me so much about working with DNA from the metaphysical perspective, not just the scientific perspective. And they've brought in a whole new reality for me to work with healing and use sound for healing and work in the vibrational frequencies of the human body to shift DNA and DNA patterns. So my expansion of DNA understanding has just blossomed being connected to them. And I work with them today still, doing all my healing sessions and work with understanding DNA better. And I'm about to teach a DNA course. And they help me develop a modality that I call vibrational genetics. And that's what I teach people how to do. The Mantis are here really to help us to learn how to heal ourselves and to make it through this rough patch that we're going through, to learn how to shift our DNA so that we can not only survive, but ascend into, or I would say evolve into the next stage of our evolution. Nope, can't hear you, Kat.
Myself.
There you go.
When I unmute myself before I start talking. What was the moment? Because I mean, this wasn't in your field of background in terms of ETs and you know, Mantis beings. So like, what was the moment where you were like, oh, this is beyond my current belief system. I'm having to let go. Maybe my brain's imploding a little bit. Maybe I, you know, don't know what's real at the moment. What was that? Can you give us a little bit of that story?
Well, I think that for me, that I never really had that with them, because ever since I was a little kid, I think that I spent a lot of time in the imaginal realm and also out in nature. So I was already felt like I was in communication with animals and insects and things like that in my own way. Not as much as I am now, but in my own way I was. And so when it started to happen to me, I had already spent time doing other healing modalities like Reiki and Theta healing. So I was already having experiences where I was working with people on the other side of the veil or in the fourth dimension. I was already spending time in that space, and I'd already had experiences. So what blew me away, though, I think, is the mind melt for me was that they were talking to me and that they wanted to help me. And then the other mind melt was that, oh, you're not just talking to me for the first time. Now I'm having memories of you being around me when I was a little kid. And you had a hand in where I was born and my whole life path here, and all these little breadcrumbs that you've been dropping the entire time about being, you know, I was so hyper focused on DNA when I went to school. There was only one lab I could work in, and I went into the professor's office and I was like, I have to work here. And he's like, okay, you can wash dishes. And I said, okay, great. I mean, it was like that. I was so focused, and I didn't really understand why. I just thought, yeah, I didn't question it. I never questioned it. I just kind of went along. And I think that all along I realized that they were just sort of, you know, prodding me along. But I was not really paying attention at the level that was required to deepen my relationship with them. So I guess at first it was a little surprising to me that, because you kind of feel like, oh, are they choosing me? And then you get over that quickly. But at first it feels like, oh, why are they talking to me? Why are they telling me how to heal the body and do all this stuff? What's my, and why, other people are talking to angels. Why am I talking to these 9-foot insectoid beings? Like, why do I get the one that scares the hell out of everyone? Right? Where's the Archangel Michael for me? But that's just how it goes, right? That's my vibration. My vibration matches their vibration. So that's.
Do you feel like you are one of their kids? Like you're a Mantis soul? Do you have that experience, or?
I do. And I know that I've had lifetimes as Mantis and have had a lot of experiences with them. Absolutely.
Ooh, all right. I'm just make a little note there. Thank you, Miss Jaylene. Lifetimes as Mantis. I want to look at that. I want to look at that. All right, Mr. Matthew, you are up next, sir. And I know you were on the show not too long ago, but nonetheless, just give us that talk about how you got into doing what you're doing and how the Mantis showed up for you within all of that.
Totally. Totally. First off, thank you once again for having me on your channel. It is a rare occurrence that I will go to another strange neighborhood out here in this weird little soul group. So it's just very rare that I turn up on other people's shows. So every single time it is, I'm like, whoa, here we go. We're doing this in another neighborhood. So I also want to say hello to everybody in the chat. I mean that sincerely. For some reason, I've been spending a lot of time in sort of chat rooms on other people's videos lately, and I see a bunch of people I know in the chat. So what's up, you guys? Put a bunch of alien emojis and poo emojis in the chat for me. It'll help me out with the energy flow. But anyway, that said, so I guess you could say at this stage of the human journey, I'm operating in the capacity of a professional, intuitive, multidimensional healer, and also probably a bunch of other strange things. Lately, I've been calling it something that a person told me last year when she kind of like described the sessions that we do. And it's a little bit like a mix between a shaman, a therapist, and an alien doctor. And so I that's just kind of like that's the frequency that we're working in now. But that said, I also came into this sort of intuitive realm through, I would say, the sort of lens of mental health treatment and care. And I had as a lot of people have heard by now, I had a massive and crazy awakening journey that for me began in 2015 when I was working as a mental health worker, and just a bunch of things just fundamentally changed and altered the path of my life. One of those having to do with what a lot of us call the walk-in process, or what other people call a soul braiding journey, where another aspect of yourself at a certain stage of the human journey kind of enters into the physical vessel. And there's a bunch of changes that occur. And so I had a big change right around 2015 when all kinds of crazy things happened in my life. It's an hours long story. We won't go into it here, but about a year later, I would say I want to say around like March of 2016, I was very involved in just kind of getting into energy work. And kind of like Jaylene said, I was starting to do Reiki and I was doing this, and it was like some weird frequency came into my life, and suddenly things had changed to such an extent that, I was involved in all these new things. And there was one particular morning where I was sitting just in this little room in my old house at the time, and I was doing a very particular type of meditation, which I will put the link in the chat for anyone that wants to try it, but it's called Ananda Mandala. Ananda Mandala. And it's essentially a breathwork practice that you just kind of hyper-oxygenate the body. It's present in many different modalities all over the world, but during this sort of hyper-oxygenation kind of meditation where you do this 1-2 breathing, like 1, 2, and it's like 1, 2, you just breathe like crazy, and you kind of do mantras on the chakras as you go up. And I was just doing it like normal, spiritual maintenance. And one day I was doing it in the morning, and right when I got to the crown, everyone, there was like this literally like a pop. This pop occurred, And I was sitting in the room with what appeared to be, sometimes people say 10 foot, 9 foot. I don't know how big it was, but it was a praying mantis type of being that was bigger than the room I was in, which was crazy to be like, how could you be in a room with a thing that's bigger than you are, bigger than the room? I don't know. I was in a room with a literal being that was bigger than me. And within that moment, it was like I'm sitting, and physically, mind you, my eyes are open, and I'm sitting there looking at this being, and we're sitting there, and then the human mind kicks in, and I'm going, what is this? What's happening? What the human mind goes wild, and all these questions and crazy mental chatter came out, and he just looked at me, and it was like they were proud of me, and it was like tears were just flowing. I feel emotional every time I talk about it. And as I sat there in that moment, the mantis being immediately turned into a boy. And it was a very young boy, probably about 15, maybe 15, maybe younger years, very dark skin, very Indian looking. He had red bands around his arms, and he was just beaming and smiling at me. And in that moment, I was like, who are you? What is this? What's happening? And the acknowledgement that I got was, like I just said, they were proud of me. They were so grateful to see me. And he said, brother Ezekiel. And it was like this name that kept coming in. And I was like, Ezekiel, what? It's like my humanness was like, what? I was bewildered by it. And I just sat with it. There was nobody I could tell in my world. My wife at the time was like, oh, really? A praying mantis being? There was nobody around that I could share those things with. And so I just continued to do my little thing. Granted, there was about 2 or 3 days worth of just a really crazy feeling after that. It was like this energetic residue was all around me. It was wild. A couple weeks later, and I'll try to make this short. Give me a bunch of awkward expressions if I start rambling on too long or start, doing weird movements. But I would say a couple weeks later, I was at a group meditation with all these people, and I was kind of learning from this group that was tied into this school in India known as Oneness University. You guys can go on a fun search on them. It's essentially just a consumer spiritual cult, kind of like vanilla thing that's out there. But they had a lot of really good practices, and what I learned from them in their group meditations was another version of the Ananda Mandala process. And one day I did it with the whole group, and once again I was face to face 2 weeks later with another mantis being out of nowhere. It was like, boom, here we are again. And within that moment, I remember, once again, the human mind kicks in, and I'm like, who are you? What is this? What's happening? Why is this going on in my life? All these tears streaming down. And he kept, it was like he was trying to talk to me. And this is where I think my experience differs from other people who are very kind of, dogmatic and clinical about how the mantis energy interacts on the earth plane, because it is very dogmatic, very, very clinical, very void of emotion, very, very much sometimes robotic. But this being looked at me and kind of laughed at me, and he was like, you're not ready. It was this kind of like one of those moments where they're like, you're not ready for this. And he kept saying this name to me, and I kept trying to say it, and I was like, Ama, Ana, and it was Atma. And so, after that meditation, on my mind's blown, and I Googled the word Atma, and I was like, what the hell does that mean? It turns out that's the higher self. And so what I learned in that moment, and there's a bunch of other things that happened, I won't go into it here, but what I was shown in that was my entry point into the human body. I was shown my entry point into what we call this 3rd to 4th density wavelength of reality, which for a lot of us is through the sun, which, as we know, is a portal. And what he showed me was that myself and a group of many others traveled through the sun, and we split off, the fractalization of our consciousness and our identities, and sort of the process of returning back to what some people call the one, or the one infinite creator, or, like the universal self. And that one of the many versions of me was this mantis being. And strangely enough, in weeks and months later, a lot of people were like, I see this weird energy around you. At that stage of my life, I didn't know what to make of it, but it started a path of fundamental change that, kind of like Jaylene was saying, they were training her to work with genetics and DNA. I think for me, it took a very, very similar course in that, about a year during the year of 2016, this switch flicked, and suddenly I was doing energy work and clearings, and I was pulling entities out of people's bodies and recognizing implantation, and I was working with all sorts of things. And so I like to say that the Mantis beings, kind of like Jaylene, they sort of trained me, or sort of reintroduced a framework or frequency of energy that fundamentally changed my life. And so anyway, watch out. I'll go on and on about it, but that's how
that's why you're here. I also want to say, Jeilene and Matthew, feel free to ask each other questions, because it's kind of like you're two Mantis kids that have come together from different schools. And it's like, what was yours? What's your Mantis school like? What's yours like? And so feel free to hop in and ask each other questions too. That was beautiful. Do you have a sense of, so you physically saw your Mantis in your physical space?
The first time, yes. And I have to be real, because I've maybe been blessed or cursed to come in contact with a number of different types of beings in this life. And that was well, I did meet a reptilian that was physical, but that was the only one of, I believe, 2 physical experiences where it wasn't like you're in an astral state. It was like I opened my eyes and I was like, it was like there, and even the air was different. It's like the air that you breathe in that space is different. Everything about it was different. But anyway, yeah.
Well, no, because I want to know, because if he was 9 feet tall or taller, bigger than your room, like, was he sitting on your couch, legs crossed, so he could fit? Was he going through the ceiling somehow because there's a dimensional lever?
That is the question, right? Because I like a lot of us that have had these experiences, the human mind kicks in later, and you sit there and you go through all kinds of analysis and like, well, how could it be? If it was like this, then how could it be like that? And to this day, granted, that was in 2016, and I'm still sitting here going, how could you be physically bigger than a physical space and still be physically in that space? By our Earth-based dynamics, it does not equate. And yet, that's literally what it was. So, it's a strange thing. But
no, fair enough. I mean, that's when you're dealing with dimensions at that point. Our fun little human brains just don't always quite grasp. And did you ever a sense? I'm sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted to say something really quick. Years before I was ever introduced to anything really officially, when I was still in my denial stages, I had somebody that was giving me a massage talking about her experience with Mantis. And, and I made some comment about, I wish I could, really tap into my abilities more. And she's like, careful what you ask for. Just because there's a huge Mantis that's just standing over us watching. And, when I first saw him, I thought I was losing my mind. But he shows up periodically, and he's been here the whole time. And I'm thinking, okay, just that look is why I don't tell anyone. And I think that's why a lot of people don't, is that skepticism that people look at you like you're losing your mind. Now it's like, oh, okay, that's what she was seeing. So I asked her questions, and she's in my, like, I see him at a different, like, as if he's in a different dimension physically right here. You just can't see him. Doesn't mean, he's not here. I'm able to see him simply because I'm at a different frequency than you are right now.
Yeah. And humans have, in this dimension, we have a lot of resistance to, which keeps us squarely in this dimension. And when you do things like breath exercises, you release that resistance. And the more you release the resistance, the more you start, flowing into other dimensional spaces. Every human being is multidimensional. It's not like some people are and some people aren't. Every single human being is multidimensional, but so many of us have layer upon layer upon layer of resistance to the travel, because I think for many, it's a fear-based resistance because it feels like you are just sort of drifting apart. I mean, what keeps our trillions of cells all in agreement to create our physical body at every single moment? Because it is an agreement. All of these cells are in agreement to create your physical corporeal body. And I think for people to travel interdimensionally, it is this fear that you're sort of like going to disassociate, and that you are not going to be able to hold it together in this realm if you're able to also move into other realms. So I think that there's just so many layers of resistance that a lot of us don't see it. And that's, conditioning, but it's also part of the deal with coming here too. It's to really experience separation. It's sort of like in our genetics that we're going to experience separation as part of our journey here. And so I think you make a really good point that it's, some people are going to see it and some people aren't. And it really does have to do with your frequency and your fear level and what your resistances are.
Right. And I also think that separation, again, being in our DNA, we want to be part of something. We miss being part of something.
Absolutely.
It's an illusion.
Every moment of every day,
moment
we miss it.
We desire that. So we want to be part of the collective. We want to have approval. We don't want to be thought of as crazy, which is what kept me from divulging any of the things that I experienced. And, and that's what kept her from talking about it. And I think that desire to fit in is part of, ironically, what blocks us from being recognizing we are part of something so much greater.
Yeah.
And so being able to completely accept both worlds, that we've come here for that separation and we're still part of everything, helps break that barrier down.
And I have a question along those lines. In terms of when you're connecting to those higher realms, because I have my own experiences of that in this body, blah blah blah. But when I did a medicine experience, plant medicine experience, like the level of it wasn't like, again, we have these ideas. We think, oh, if I met a mantis, I would do this. Oh, if I had the opportunity to be on a spaceship, I just walk up to it. And we have these narratives while we're in our normal state where we're in control and we get to choose a fantasy. We're the one in control of the fantasy. And I'm wondering, like, in those states of connection, does it feel like, oh my God, I'm losing control. And the ego is like, this isn't who you are. Who are you right now? I'm wondering if there's like part of an ego death that is associated with then merging with these higher frequencies, where it does feel like maybe an acid trip or a mushroom trip or something like that, because it feels so out of control mentally, psychically. And both either can speak to this.
Okay. Do you want to start, Matthew, or do you want me to start? I don't want to talk over you. Oh, I can't hear you.
We can't hear you.
Said, yeah, feel free, and then I will go ahead.
So that's a really good, interesting point, Kat. And I think that happens a lot when people experience a visitation, whether we call everything extraterrestrial here that we don't understand, but really any multidimensional frequency energy that comes into your space. But also the thing that they've showed me and the Mantis have taught me about our DNA is that when another being who has adapted to being very good at moving through different dimensional spaces and has a mastery over doing that, which any being who's coming to visit you does, because it's very difficult to get into the third dimension and hold yourself, I would say, spatially in the third dimension. This is a difficult dimension to work with, and the Mantis have taught me that it's much easier to be in the higher frequencies, and it's more and more of a challenge, and it's a skill that they can learn to do, but it's not that they don't all have that skill. Anyway, when they come in and they start working and intercalating into your energy field in order to communicate with you, they literally are working with the different frequencies of different strands of your DNA in order to calm your emotional field down and some would call it control, and many beings have used that technique to control the human in order to get them into their ship or to do an abduction. But many beings, such as the Mantis, also do it so that when they show up, the person is not so much in their fear that they have a heart attack and die, right? Or they might show up as the little boy, right? They might come in. I was listening to a story of a woman who met a Mantis, and the being came in as this beautiful woman, but she knew intuitively that that's not what the real identity was. And the being said, look at the window. She looked at the window and she saw a Mantis. And so she just didn't want to, sorry, hold on.
They're like,
No
Mom,
worries.
there's a mantis being outside. Mom, the mantises are here.
Oh, there she comes. All right.
I'm back. Anyway, sorry about that. That's just life, right? My dogs.
Yeah.
But the point is that they work with the energy fields. Our DNA is a frequency. It's not. It's a liquid crystalline frequency holding. It's like a crystal. It emits, it absorbs, it emits, and it is able to transmute energy, understand, digest energy. And so, because of that multidimensional nature of our DNA, that's where beings are interacting with us and they're controlling our emotional response so
Mhm.
that they're able to do that. And I'm a true believer that humans can start to learn how to do this as well. And that's my goal with the Mantis is teach people how to do that. So, anyway, that's the perspective that they've shown me is that yes, you get into that fear state, but then it's possible to shift out of that through a mastery of understanding those fields.
Okay, so it's more exposure. It's like exposing yourself to those fields versus waiting for them to do it. You can do your homework and start to expose yourself to that through working with your DNA or through work. Like how would I expose myself to higher dimensions so that wouldn't it created an opening to be able to connect with my higher aspect who might be a mantis or might be a lion or whatever the food might be. Is that what do you say about that? Do
Yeah.
I
Yes,
I'm sorry.
absolutely. Sorry. Yeah, it is about working with your DNA, and it is about recognizing that you don't have to have another being work on your DNA, right? That you as a human can learn how to interact with your own cellular matrix, your own DNA, and you can start to make shifts in it energetically through your intention, your focus, and your energy, and that you can start to open up and adapt your DNA not only to this crazy environment that we're living in and all these changes we're going through, but also to bring on more of your multidimensional nature into the here and the now. And that's really, I think, the goal of the Mantis with human beings right now is to teach us how to gain that mastery over our genetics, our own genetics, to take ownership and sovereignty of our own genetics so that we can evolve as a species in a way that consciously feels good for us as opposed to, having this being come in from somewhere else and messing with our genetics and our DNA or, doing something that we don't have control over. The loss of sovereignty or the notion that we don't have sovereignty over ourselves is a very outdated one. And it's time for us to take personal ownership and responsibility of our own genome and to start to work with it specifically to evolve in directions that we of our choosing, not to be the experiment anymore.
Yeah, I love that. To not be the we'll talk more about that. I made notes on that because that's opens up a whole beautiful can of worms. But I wanted Mr. Matthew. Thank you, Jaylene. And Mr. Matthew, what is your take on that?
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Well, first off, there's so much to go. There's so many areas where I would comment on that. I'm going to try to rewind through some of it. Really, really, really well said. I absolutely agree in terms of what I call the sort of experiential filtering process of how you become acclimatized to certain types of, ETs or whatever it is. Yes, there's often this strange illusionary journey where sometimes they're very cartoon-like. Sometimes the ship you go on is like a McDonald's in outer space. The inner child activates and you go through this weird sort of series of filtered kind of experiences that are really, symbolically, covering up what's actually going on. So that's also a thing that I think I experienced a lot as a child. And anyway, to kind of go back to the more relevant parts of that, I very much agree that there is an incredibly genetic aspect to what we would call just the energy of the mantis beings, at least the ones that I have kind of worked with. And here's the thing: I'm definitely not what we would call a specialist in those energies. It has been what I've acknowledged as one of the kind of primary forms that I've taken in a number of lifetimes. But what I noticed, kind of like Jaylene was saying, after kind of connecting with those energies, is that it's very much, see, how do I articulate this in a way that will make sense? I agree that one of the missions of these beings is to help us learn how to be sovereign and to be in full control over our genome, over our DNA, over the frequencies that are emitted, and kind of how we guide our own process of evolution. I absolutely agree with that. And what I've noticed in my journey with respect to how these energies continually show up is that they took a little bit of a different form for me. And it stopped being sort of this, what I would call like an all guiding kind of frequency. And it was a frequency that put me in touch with others. And so kind of my journey with the Mantis beings has been almost an introduction into a process of connecting with the spiritual entourage for everyone. Meaning that I think in my life, that those were some of the primary guides that I worked with. And their purpose was not only to kind of give me information about, you know, energetic anatomy, but to sort of open the door into the other work that I've been doing. So, it's funny, as I'm giving this reply, I realize I twisted off from what I was originally going to say, but hopefully it makes sense all the same. Anyway, I definitely agree with what you're saying. And I actually have a question for Jaylene. Wow, that was such a disjointed reply, but do you feel, I know, right? It's like, what?
You're great.
Did you notice that when you had your initial experiences with these beings, that they kind of downloaded knowledge into your body? Like you suddenly just knew things. It's like, I didn't know that last week, and now it makes total sense. Did you have that, like anything like that?
Oh, for sure. And it still happens. And I also wanted to actually make a comment. You said something just a minute ago about how they, I usually say that they broker the space for me between me and other beings. And that's exactly what Mari, my guide, does. And she has introduced me to, or made, she creates the energetic platform for me to interact with other beings in a really safe way. And I think that's the other thing that maybe people don't realize about the Mantis, is that they're very protective, and that they're very good at creating a nice protected healing space. And I think, Matthew, if you're working with not so friendly energy sometimes, then you would understand, or you probably relate to this, is that it's very important to have an energetic platform that's clean and clear when you are inviting other multidimensional creatures or energies in, right? Because you don't want it to get tainted or sort of muddled with other energies. And that is what Mari has always done for me. She's always created this field of energy that allows me to interact in different channels with different dimensional frequencies or energies. Is the way I feel like, because I'm more clairsentient, every being to me that I interact with is a frequency, or is an energy or a vibration, right? That's how I tell the difference between an Arcturian versus a Sirian versus a Pleiadian. It's how they feel to me. And so a lot of times I don't even see them visually super clearly, but I feel them. And then I know, oh, I know who you are, because I know you. That's actually how I know people too. I might not remember your name, but I know how you feel. And that I will remember. And so I think you made really good points there, is that they do broker the space, and they're always kind of in the background. And I think they're always watching us from the long game. And so they're in the background sort of watching. They like to let us do our thing and evolve in our own rate. But I think that they're interacting now because of this, tricky time that we're going through. But I like the way you said it, and it's a good reminder that, they're not always so hands-on, but they always will be there to be supportive. And even though they're non-emotional, they're incredibly loving. So that's the other thing about them. I think it's important to mention.
Which is kind of a strange situation from other perspective, that, and I have a feeling that you've encountered this in connecting with Mantis energies on, just in other times. I have actually been kind of shocked by how unemotional the energies are. And I have been in sessions with people, and they're going through this incredible trauma, and it's like, wow, that's very sensitive and raw. And it's like this Mantis energy is just like, snip, just cut it out, boom. And it's like,
right.
And it's like, there's so like, true. There's no like, what's the word? Bedside manner. It's just like, it is or it isn't. Either
I know, they're very matter of fact.
Yeah.
Very matter of fact, but in a loving way, I would say, in a loving way. It's weird. It's like you're infused with love, and like you said, they're downloading all this information, which was, I think, was your original question. Sorry, I'm the one that
Oh
rolled
yeah,
off on
no,
that
it's all
one.
good. I always go on a weird. You have no idea.
Yeah. So they're infusing all this information into your body. It feels like the way they infuse information, it doesn't just come into your brain. It's like it goes into every cell in your body. It goes into your DNA, and it's like you just own it after they're communicating with you. Like they're communicating with you energetically to your whole being, and in all of your dimensional layers. And so yeah, they, of course, they don't need to be emotional, I guess is the way I would respond to that. They are evolved to a state where they don't need to be emotional to prove to humans that they care. Of course they care, or else they wouldn't be there. Of course they care and they love us because they're part of our creation story. Of course they care. They've been watching us for millions of years. They don't need to get emotional and go into that low vibrational space with us in order for us to understand that they care, that they heal us, right? They just do. They don't need to. That's sort of, I just had somebody ask me this question because I was working on them, and they said, I don't think I like the fact that, what do you mean they're not emotional? I don't think I want to be connected with a being that isn't emotional. And I had to say, no. They're loving. They're just not emotional. Or one could say they're not out of control of their emotions, that they feel that they need to reflect yours back to you in order for you to feel nurtured and
Right.
cared for.
It's like when
Maybe. I
I
was
was
just say
just-
maybe Spock is the personification of a mantis.
Well,
Yeah,
He's
is
still-
Spock
he's-
loving? I don't know how
Well,
loving
he
Spock
does.
is.
He actually shows it in many ways, even though he didn't
That's true.
express it. There
Well,
are other ways.
It's
How about
true.
you, Jason?
I'm just enjoying the conversation. It is nice to see some of the commonalities. So like, with Manny, Manny the Mantis, right, that I've connected to, your stories of like how they presented themselves in another way, right? Like it's because it was the same thing. I was like, well, how are you not going to be scared of this giant bug man, right? So for me, he put a bow tie on, right? Because bow ties are funny, right? And it and plus the sense of the feeling of that overwhelming concern for me and my mental health, right, while interacting. They were like, oh, this is funny, let me present myself this way, this is not scary. And then like the pure unconditional like love is the only way that I can, even though they may not be, they may have no bedside manner, I'm like, people are, how are you not scared? I'm like, well, if you feel this instead of just see it, right, the combination of the both really helps lower that fight or flight instinct. And I would recommend to anybody, like it's such a pure energy, right? Like set the intent, ask, and be open to the possibility of. So yeah, it's nice to hear the commonalities with the experiences.
And I think, like all beings, Mantis, no being is perfect, right? And humans tend to be very judgmental, so we don't always understand the full purview of what they're doing, why they're doing, when they're doing it. And so it's easy to be judgmental, I would think, if you've heard that they're involved in the abduction, or they're there in the background sort of running things. I think that's a story that we've all heard, or people have had experiences with. They're not just stories, but we don't really know the backstory or the why they're there. We also don't really understand it from our human perspective. And I think that we have, we tend to, as humans, assign meaning, good, bad, and otherwise very quickly. And so I think we have a very narrow perspective on the big picture. And I think they're very much big picture beings. And we don't always understand why and the what for, but they will tell you if you ask them. So I would say ask.
Nice. And I was just going to say earlier, like when you go to the doctor, if you have to get your spleen removed, or, there's something that's going on, the doctor's not like they're crying with you about the surgery. Like that would really throw you off. If your doctor was as emotional as you are about what you have to go through, it would really throw you off. Like you didn't go to the doctor for them to cry with you. You went, for a certain procedure. So I think that clarity that they have is like, it doesn't serve you for them to become emotionally involved in whatever your journey is. Not to say they don't respect it, but they're just not going to get emotionally involved. They can watch your soap opera without subscribing to it,
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I wanted to ask then, this is kind of a big question, but why are the mantis here? Like, what about this crazy planet interests them? Like you said, Jaylene,
Right.
they've been here for millions of years. So, I mean, this is like, if they've been here for millions of years, then that puts us into a time frame when, the more that I research and understand, there were many different species. There were the Denisovans or something like that. There was Neanderthal, who was not like Ugg with a stick, like they were intelligent species. There are several different intelligent species. We're the only ones left, at least that we physically are aware of. But there were many species going on during the different stages of evolution of consciousness on the planet and the physical evolution on the planet. I'm just wondering, what's in it for them? Like, why would this interest them? What's this about for them? And I'll toss it to Matthew to start with this time, and we'll kind of take turns flipping it back and forth.
So the question is, why are they here and what's in it for them? Like, just so I understand, because I'll just go on a weird long rant. I want to make sure I'm aiming it in the right direction. And so what I have observed and what I have received is that, number one, and I think a lot of us already know this to be true, but the mantis beings, or sort of their collective, have been on Earth far longer than any human consciousness has ever been present here. They're part of a lot of the groups that sort of, what some people say, they colonized, some people say they crashed on Earth, some people say they helped create Earth. There's a million different like creation stories around how and why they originated and how they got here. One thing we know, at least we know enough about to know that we know nothing, is that they have been here far, far, far longer than the humans. I do believe that within the sort of the many partitioned races or genetic races that exist on Earth, I think the mantis beings had a hand in sort of the genetic creation of a lot of sort of certain people's frequencies, meaning they're part of like the creator network of many beings, or they had a hand, they sort of put their mixture in. And I think the reasons are many. I think that what I've observed in terms of the non-human interactive mantis energy, I believe, is far greater than the human interactive mantis energy, meaning it seems to me that there are a number, like I should even put a number on it. There are countless numbers of insectoid, extraterrestrial, higher dimensional energies. And most of them, as far as I can tell, really don't give a shit about humans. They really don't care about us. They're not involved in us. They're working with the planet. They're working with a number of systems. They're working with non-physical energies. I think last year there was a group of beings that I had contact with for a brief time there was insectoid beings within the mix, but a lot of them were these really weird looking human guys. And their whole frequency or their mission was about reawakening technology that's buried under the ground, like physical stones and physical pieces of technology. And so to me, when I've looked at the many places in which I have seen their energy, I believe they're here for a myriad of reasons. But one thing that I've recognized, and I think there's other people that have a much more clear view into their motivations, maybe Jaylene will know more, but what I've noticed is that by and large, they are the geneticists of this realm. Then there's many genetic type of beings that interact with our DNA, but it stands to reason that's one of their specialties. That's where they really excel. And I think when we look at one of the questions of, well, why are they here now, working with us humans on a greater level, if you think they're doing all this other stuff with non-human energies, I think that's where we come into the process of what, it's really just a kind of a new age, buzzword now, but that's where we come into the ascension process, where it's like those that are tied to the evolution of the mantis collective are also going to be going through a very particular type of ascension process that has to do with that specific collective. And so I think that they're also working with humans on a greater level now, because they're going through an ascension process of their own. And so that means there's going to be more knowledge shared, there's going to be more healing, there's going to be more connections, there's going to be what we call the unveiling of the ages of hidden knowledge. And one of those pieces of hidden knowledge that's coming out right now is the fact that many of us on the earth plane are inextricably linked through our DNA with these beings. And so, I guess it's a gross generalization, but the mantis are us and we are them. Many different, steps like removed. And so anyway, to summarize, they've been here and they will be here long after us. Long after us. But anyway, I'll shut up on that.
That's great.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. They've been here long before us. They'll be here long after us. And I've been working on a book with them and just spending a lot of time with them. And I asked them about their journey, and they said that their journey started, like all of us, as sort of a thought or an expression of the one source. And that as they started, the thought was, how do we spread life throughout the universe? How do we create expansion? And so there's lots of different ways to create experience, or how do we create more experience? Well, in the upper dimensions, it's all energetic. And so they started out as high dimensional energetic beings and then learned how to move down the frequency ladder. And we think of it linear ladder. I'm describing it that way. Of course, we know it's not. But so moving down into the dimensions and mastering sort of each energetic realm and learning how to create life in each energetic realm. So that's what they've expressed to me, that they have learned how to work in all these different frequencies and create life in each one of them. So why are they here? To me, originally, they're here for Earth. They're part of the Earth frequency. They work with Earth as an incredible being. She's on a really important energetic node in the universe. She transmits and creates a lot of frequency that is a beacon and stimulates a lot of evolution and growth in other parts of the universe. So what we're having here, and there's 11 other planets that are similar to Earth that are part of this system that is all creating, what we call them Goldilocks planets, or a planet that can support biological life. And the Mantis have helped to generate life on each one of those. And so Earth is unique and not unique. It's unique in that Earth she's our mama, right? All of our elements and everything that makes up our body comes from her body. So the Mantis work in collaboration with Earth to create life. And they also work in collaboration with her to create ascension, yes, for their own species, but then also for the millions of species that we have here on the planet. So all of it creates energy and frequency. And in fact, we all have microbes within us. We all have mitochondria in us. And they've taught me about how mitochondria are like the calling card of Earth. So the mitochondria in our body generate energy. That energy broadcasts out information and signal out to the rest of the universe. It's part of Earth's broadcast frequency, the mitochondria and every single being on this planet. And that is broadcasting out information. And that is how a lot of information is relayed and how other beings understand what's happening on Earth. So the Mantis are involved in our shared evolutionary story. And why they care now, or why they're interacting with us now, is that they would say, we've always been interacting with you from a certain perspective. They tend to have a tendency to hang back. They create and then they let it happen because they want to see. You can't muddle with an experiment too much. And I don't like to call this an experiment, but you can't muddle with something too much, because then it starts to become only a reflection of your own expression, and they want it to be an expression of its own right. So humans are in that category, just like all life is here. But we are going through a transition, and I think you're right, Matthew, that they're also going through a transition that is reflected in us because we have shared DNA. But they're trying to help us, just like they're helping themselves. They've already gone through, I think, that type of evolution that we've gone through, but from, I would say, the other direction. They came from high and they went into low, and we're going, perhaps you could say, into from a lower frequency and into a higher one, becoming more liquid crystalline, becoming more ethereal. And so it's almost like in reverse. They've gone like, it's kind of like this. So it's just different. If you think of an infinity symbol, we're in different stages of the loops, right? But we're all in the same continuum.
So I have a question on that. Are they working on us as a collective whole, or are they finding groups or individuals that they're working with or changing that
We're all
DNA?
holographic, right? Holographically connected. So they don't need to work on every single being here. They can work with a lot. They are working with a lot of humans, though. I hear a lot of people talking about them now. They're definitely in the collective consciousness now. They're definitely working with a lot of people. But I think they work with nodes. So a person might be a node and as an energy broadcaster of a particular ability, I guess you could say, or has a energy footprint that becomes a certain size, and that broadcasts out and starts shifting DNA around it, because we're all shifting each other's DNA all the time through the energy fields. And so to me, the way that I understand they're working is that they're working through nodes, so they don't have to work with every human, but they are making energetic shifts overall through that holographic field. What do you think, Matthew?
Um, in terms of where or who are they working with?
Well, no, but in terms of like, are they working with the whole collective, or are they working with individuals more?
Well, it feels like it's on a collective level, and I like the idea of nodes. That makes a lot of sense. It does feel like there's a lot of just kind of collective interaction, meaning like it's part of the change that's occurring on Earth right now. But I'll just say it. It feels like there's a number of people on the Earth plane that have made pre-existing agreements to connect with this energy on a greater level, specifically in this chapter of the human life cycle. And we're coming to the stage in the human life cycle where it's almost like the building blocks or the substrands or the little pieces of our DNA, as they continue to light up, it's like a little light turns on. And that's the Mantis one. And then a few months later, or a year later, as we go through a process of healing, the next slide turns on, and I don't know, maybe that's I don't know, what do you want to call it? The inner earth one. And then after that, we have the reptilian one. And so to me, what I've noticed is that it's for some people, it's going to be very, very heavy. I think that myself and probably yourself, so those are the people that made and lots of others on the earth plane made a pre-existing agreement to be in a more contractual relationship. So some people, in my opinion, are like those nodes. Some of us are literally that. And through us and through many of other experiences, people come into greater contact with those energies. And so, I definitely agree. I think there was an additional point I was going to make there, but it was probably irrelevant because it kind of snuck out as I was talking. But
None of it's irrelevant.
Right.
It's
Well,
all
it's all good.
Good.
I wanted to ask you then, because I like this idea of, and it feels true to me, of Earth being one of the energetic nodes in the universe. And can you speak to what that means? What's it mean to be that Earth is an energetic node in the universe? And then how does that show up with us being energetic nodes? Like, how does that translate down? Because I'm sure you all know that when you look one way, then you look the other way, it's all as above, so below as above. Like it's mirror upon mirror upon mirror. But I'm just wondering if you could break down how Gaia is a node and how we're nodes and how that connects.
Yeah, that's such a great question, Kat. So while you were talking and asking that question, what they showed me is that really the concept of fractals is really an important concept to integrate into your understanding of the way everything works, because we know that a fractal is a small part but it's also part of the whole, right? It's a small representation, but it's exactly the representation of the whole. And so I don't understand all the mathematics behind fractals, but they use fractals with me all the time as an explanation. And because of my simple brain, I think of it as that it's this perfect representation of the all that is encapsulated in the single tiny molecule, right? And so humans as nodes is like the molecule, and then the earth as a node is like the whole being. We're like a cell of the earth, basically. And then, so we're part of the Earth's body. That's the way I feel that humans are. We're literally part of her body. We're like a cell in her body. We're a broadcasting cell. We're another part of her DNA. And that then is broadcasting information out. And then they've shown me these other 11 planets. So we're 12 planets, and these 12 planets are also creating a massive energy. And we also, each planet has its sun that is, like you said earlier, Matthew, is a portal for information to flow through. And so there's all these, I don't really totally understand it, Kat, but with the bits that they've shown me is that I know that Earth is this important node, and I don't know exactly the why, other than it's sort of like the meaning of life. Like, why are we here? It's such a big question. Why are we creating all this energy? Where is it going? Who's receiving it apart from source? But it seems that we are just in this ever expansive, like if you watch one of those fractal things where they keep zooming in, and it's just like constantly expanding. And that's really the only explanation they've ever given me. They're like, stop looking for the emotional why. It's just ever expanding. It just is. And so there's all this energy getting created in different ways, and it's just infinite, right? Again, the infinity symbol. Like, how many infinite different ways can you create energy and experience reality? And it's infinite, and it just keeps going and expanding and creating. And I don't know that there's a reason for it other than that. That's all I've really ever gotten from them. I don't know. Have you gotten anything else, Matthew? I'd love to hear it if there's a why. I think humans want there to be a why so bad.
Yeah, we need it. Yeah.
I definitely feel you on what you're saying. It's like you're really good at articulating that in a way that's very digestible. I think
Thank you.
what I have realized is maybe a bit of an oversimplification. And I guess if you know me, you'll know I'll either grossly oversimplify something or completely overcomplicate it. But it usually evens out somewhere in the middle. But what I've noticed, and once again, it's a horrible generalization, but when we look at the why, this is literally what we do. The why is because this is what we do. And every time we come here, we're like, I'm not coming back. I'm not going to incarnate on Earth again. No way, man. And then what happens? Sure enough, we're like, I can't wait. Let's go back. Let's do it again. I guess what, you guys, I heard they're having an ascension down there. Come on, let's go, dude. Everybody's going to go. And then we're going to get here and go, why are we here? What the hell? I can't believe I did this. Oh, and then by the time we leave, we're like, it's a whole different thing. And so I think that's part of the process for a lot of third to fourth density, to third to fourth to fifth, depending on which new age timeline you want to subscribe to. We either hopscotched over fourth density and now we're in 10th or something. But I think that there's many planets or many kind of biodomes like Earth that are in this stage of growing pains right now. And so to me, I know everyone's like, there's this many planets and there's this. What I've noticed is there's an infinite number of them, and there's an infinite number of Earths. And there's an infinite number of us's, me's, and you's having this conversation in the now moment. And I think when I look at the why of it, it's like there is no why. It's because this is what we literally do. This is kind of like, I think you mentioned what I believe they call the Mandelbrot sequence, where the fractals that are constantly opening up. I only know that because the video came by on my Facebook timeline, and I'm like, oh, that's a Mandelbrot sequence. So
right. Thank you.
I don't know why I know that term, but I think that's the nature of our realm, and it's not even about why. It's about what do we do with it. What do you want to do with it? What are your desires? And it stands to reason.
So true. Yeah.
Right. Like
they say that to me all the time. I'll say why, and they'll say, what do you want? They always put it back on us. Don't forget you're a creator of your own reality. Learn how to do it. Learn how to work through genetics. You create your body. Don't sit there and wallow in pity because you're in disease. Fix it. Learn how to fix it. Here, we'll show you how. Yeah, stop acting like you don't know how to do this when you already know how to do it. Just remember, just spend the time to figure it out. Yeah.
I totally agree. Mm-hmm. Anyway.
Yep. High five on that.
I love it. Would you say that is your sense of the 12 planets being the 12 nodes? Are they the 12 nodes of the galaxy, of the universe? Because when I think of nodes, I think of like, I'm not, because again, I go, what is it about? How's it function? And I'm like, to me, I'm like, as I tune into it, it feels like there's a harmonics where they connect in through each other, and there's something within the 12 that creates a stabilized field for life or expression or something. Do you have any sense of that, or does that just sound like I'm talking crazy?
No, I like that. I actually don't know. I haven't spent enough time with them. They mentioned it in a channel I was doing when I was working on my book, and I didn't revisit it to ask them like the why and the why about it because I got distracted by something else they said and went down a different rabbit hole. But yeah, I don't know. I know that it does feel like a network of energy, and it does feel like all of these different planets are in communication with each other, and that they brought that up as being like the ones that I work with, by the way, the mantis I work with are very earth-centric, earth-based. They're not moving around on ships that much. And I want to make another comment. I think something you said, Matthew, kind of brought this to my attention too, is that when I first started working with them, I would see them so clearly in my mind's eye. I didn't see them in person the way you did, Matthew, but I would see them so clearly in my mind's eye. And I have to say that sometime around last summer, so almost a year ago, they moved out. They moved like really far away from me. And at first, I have to say, it was like, like, why do they do that? Why do they, you feel like you just have like some like energy vacuum created. Like they just moved really far away from me. And I felt actually like they moved out of the earth. They were really focused, concentrated their energy here. And I feel like they backed way up. And I've asked them why, and they said to me that, that they're basically, look, we're taking the training wheels off. It's time for you to do this on your own. It's time, not all of Earth, but my relationship with them. And then I realized, oh, they're still there. They haven't gone away. They're still there, but they're really like, it's this very like high altitude, thin, ethereal connection I have with them now. Yeah. Where it feels like it's just, they're still downloading information, but it's not as obvious anymore. And they said, you don't need that anymore. It's just this very light touch. And I think that their touch on the earth it's interesting because all these people are having experiences with them. But on the other hand, I feel like their touch has become very light. And perhaps they're distracted. Like you said, they're going through their own thing too, Matthew, and they're working on their own stuff. But I really feel like a multidimensional being can do two things at once. So I don't think that really is right. I think that they just have decided that they've got to just back up a little bit. They came in, they zoomed in, and they've backed up a bit.
Makes sense.
Do you feel that too, Matthew?
Yeah, totally. Almost like stages of a mission. And at a certain stage, we'll be working in this, like capacity. And when the human reaches this stage of their entrainment or knowledge or evolution, we will then go to this stage and they'll come in that way. And it's funny that you mentioned the sensation of pulling away, because that is also something, or what we perceive as that was also one of the really big experiences for me upon initially coming in contact with these energies. Because I would say around 2017, 18, that was like the sort of be all end all of I'm like, oh my God, you saw this thing and it was in front of me and it was real and it was there. And it was this massive force in my life. It was a thing that like propelled me forward largely into doing what I'm doing now. Mm-hmm. And what I noticed, like you were saying, a stage came in which I realized that it sounds cheesy, but it's almost like we kind of, as humans, maybe we grow up just a little and they're like, okay, you don't need me to hold your hand through all this. You know what.
Right.
And we're like, what? I can't. And then you do. And what I've noticed is that sort of
so hard to let go.
Right. As that frequency kind of adjusted, or as a lot of people, there's so many spiritual buzzwords that get thrown around that I know I'll speak for me. Sometimes I forget what they actually mean. And I'll be like, I realized I integrated that energy. And so what happens when you would integrate an energy, you would come to new conclusions, new understandings. You've absorbed the frequency into yourself. It is now a part of you. And so to me, after some, healing and looking at it, I was like, I realized that frequency is now a part of me. And kind of, I know it takes a different route for every person that interacts with these energies. But what I realized that it had done for me, was number one, downloading just all kinds of knowledge of energetic anatomy, which has just been one of the focal points of my journey. But also it gave me the experience of learning what it was like to connect with non-physical energies. And so based upon the experiences that I had with these couple or however many mantis beings, it's like that showed me how to connect with others. And it was almost like they needed to sort of go, okay, I'm just going to stop holding your hand now. Let's see how you do. Go ahead. See what happens. And so I think for a lot of us, that's the stage that we're in. But in hearing you describe it, to me, it sounds like you went through a very distinct upgrade. And it was like, okay, she's sort of graduated. Now you're going to go on to do this. And we're just going to watch you over here. We're still here. Just
yeah.
So anyway,
I'm
that's
like,
what
Mommy, come back.
Right. We're like,
don't go. But they didn't go. They're there. I know they're there. It's just, you know what's so funny tonight, because they don't do this thing where they like come into my room anymore, you know, like they used to. And but I know that they're there. And last night, it's such a little thing. They always leave their calling card. And in the beginning, Kat, you said, why are there the actual mantis insects here on Earth? And to me, that they interact with those beings, the big ones interact with, or the energetic ones interact with the physical ones, the little ones, and use them as calling cards all the time. Or, you know, they're in the same frequency. So it's easy for them to say like, yeah, you know, go here and land on this window so this person can see it or whatever. And so just, they always leave their little calling card. This is their thing. It's what they do. And anyone who starts interacting them will have an experience with them. And it doesn't always have to be a physical insect. So about 3 years ago, my sister sent me this swatch of fabric that has mantises all over it. And I couldn't have told you where it was if you asked me to go retrieve it in my house. But last night, I'm getting ready for bed. I look on the floor and that little square of fabric is on my floor. And I'm like, oh, it's because of tomorrow. And they're just letting me know that they're with me and that they're going to be there tomorrow. And that I don't have to worry about, you know, the fact that they're kind of haven't been around me, because look, they're right there. So just funny stuff like that. They do that all the time. They do have a sense of humor. They may not be emotional, but they do have a sense of humor.
I really want to agree with the calling card element, which I had actually heard other people talking about this a while back, and I was like, I don't know, I never got any calling cards. And then sure enough, prior to leaving LA, I guess it was earlier last year, they started showing up, and it was like I would walk outside, and I remember one morning there was a dead mantis on the sidewalk, and I was like, this is in the middle of Los Angeles. What the hell is a praying mantis doing dead on the sidewalk? Yeah. There's no praying mantises around here. And then I would say about a month later, me and my wife walk outside of our house at night. It was like 10 p.m. and we were going to walk somewhere, and I closed our front door, and there's a live mantis perched on our front door of our house at 10 o'clock at night, just chilling, hanging out right on the door.
Right.
How and why? They're not even in this city. They're not even here. And I remember going, that's it. That's the sign. They're literally here. So
they
are on the calling card thing, man. Yeah.
Big time. And I've had so many people I've worked on and done a session for, and then the next day they've never seen a mantis before, and the next day there's like one on their windshield. Like a friend of mine she drove all the way from like middle California out to the coast, and this mantis stayed on her windshield the entire time. So she's like, okay, I get it. You're here. Yeah. So
I have a question. Sorry to interrupt. This is for Jaylene. And so this is more of a philosophical kind of thing, but what I have observed, I would love to get your opinion on this. What I have observed, especially because we talked about how they were here and they were really strong and they were hanging out with us and taught us, and then they kind of stepped away. Mm-hmm. I had this idea not too long ago that it's not so much as that energy kind of, you know, leaves us or stands at a distance. It's that we embody that mantis energy. Mm-hmm. And it's sort of like you absorb it and you become it.
Yes.
On a certain level. What do you think about that?
I totally agree with you. In fact, it's like you're looking for it and you can't see the forest through the trees, right? You're trying to find it, but you can't get outside of yourself to look back at yourself to see that you've become the thing that you was outside of you. Yeah, you're totally right. It becomes integrated and it just becomes, and then you think, oh, I don't have to go connect to a being outside of myself to get the download. Like the download is me. I'm the download. So yeah, absolutely. And when that first occurred to me. I didn't want to say that because I thought it made it sound like I was trying to make myself sound like I was like this big entity.
Some high and mighty mantis person.
Right. Oh yeah. I'm a 12th dimensional mantis. So, because they do have a good sense of humor, and they also are very clear with me, like, hey, you're special, but you're not special. Everybody's special, but you're not like extra special just because we're talking to you, right? Like, you're a mantis, like, get over it.
You're special. You're special just like everyone else.
Exactly. Yeah. You're special, but you're not special. So it's a kind of a funny thing that they always relay that to me telepathically. And so when it happened to me, I knew that, okay, I'm starting to get it. At first I was like, the vacuum. And then I kind of started to get it. And then I got comfortable with it. And then I felt the vibe differently in my body. And I realized, okay, it's okay. It's okay. I don't have to panic, right? My whole career with them as a healer is not over. It's just like I just became what they were, just like you were saying. Yes. It's just that, I don't necessarily broadcast that because it feels like, although I just did, but, because it feels like you're trying to grandiose or something, which I'm pretty clear is something that they say gets in the way of being a good healer. Yes.
The curse of self-importance.
Yes. And so many healers on this planet have gotten spiraled up into their ego and not done great things. And so.
Yeah. Did you have a question, Miss Linda? I saw you came off mute, and I think someone asked a question from the
yes. So we've had
several
people bring up whether the clicking that they hear, if they communicate through clicking, because they hear clicking.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's like a series of clicks and whistly sounds. It's like it's
wow.
That's how I used to hear them a lot. And sometimes after working on people, they'll tell me that they've had that experience of hearing those sounds.
You guys must have been picking up what I was questioning, because just as I was getting ready to type, what's the relationship with the small mantis that we have, you answered it. So thank you for picking up what I was laying down.
Yeah. Can I just comment on that really quickly? There's a weird synchronicity here, because when we started here today, before the recording even began, we were in here talking. And when Jaylene was talking in the beginning, I was actually going to make a comment about, I hear some clicking and popping and and I was like, interesting. And here we are. Sure enough, in the chat, someone's like, do they communicate in clicks? And so here's the thing. I would like to say I have encountered I don't even know if it was mantis beings in that situation, but I have encountered a number of what we would call just beings that they would emanate some sort of a sound like that, or there's like, it's almost like a sensation that you or I'll speak from my own experience. It was like a sensation of clicking and popping rather than the auditory version of it. But I will say one thing that I have found pretty universal when it comes to how these beings communicate. The standard, at least what I've learned of communication in higher density beings, is entirely telepathic. And so there is really no sort of word or utterance that needs to take place. And this is my theory on the sort of sounds or the sensations of weird visceral movements that we would encounter. I believe, at least so far, the theory is that's actually the movement and the gesturing and the physicalness of them upon creating a communication. There's somewhat of a thing that occurs. And so it's not so much that we would be discerning their communication as a strange sound. We discern it exactly as it is, but their body or their elements or their energy will create this sort of like type of thing. But anyway, I don't know if that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, that feels right to me. Definitely. I'd never even thought about that. That's cool that you actually thought about it. But yeah, that feels about right. They do use sound in this dimension, though, of course, because it's a really rapid and efficient way to shift DNA frequency. But you're right. I don't think they are using their clicks, their sounds that they make as
words,
a means of words, because they're always speaking telepathically to us. Yeah.
Well, I wanted to ask you, kind of taking this idea of the mini mantis on the planet, the insects mantis, and them being here, and the idea of there being, from the micro to the macro, like my understanding is that Earth is a living library where genetics are stored, and that's one of the original purposes. It's a living library for genetics, and and therefore anything that you have Sekhmet, but you also have a kitty cat. You have these mantis beings, which you also have, the little insects. And I'm wondering what your understanding of that is as Earth as a living library, and then the whole idea about there being 22 genetic farmer races that have been working with the planet, maybe competing with each other. We'll get into that one as a part 2, but I want to hear your thoughts on that first. Earth is a living library, if you've heard of that before, if you understand that to be true or not true.
Yeah, so it's, as I was mentioning before, that this planet is crystalline in nature and that our DNA is crystalline in nature. And we know that crystals absorb, transmute, and emit, right? That they're like little batteries. And this whole planet is crystalline. So yes, it is a data storage bank, and all of our DNA. So we're all the storage. DNA is a storage vehicle, but it's also got these morphogenic fields around it that different strands, right? There's 12 strands, and that they all relate to different dimensional frequencies. And so it's our whole Akashic field is available to us through those morphogenic fields in the DNA. So the whole planet's DNA, you could say, has its own Akash. You could say the Earth has its own Akash. And it's all through that vehicle of those fields of energy that relate to other dimensional frequencies. They act as portals. They act as, ways to shift consciousness, and they bring information in. So it's not just being stored. It's also being emitted. So it's a constant back and forth, is the way I see it.
Cool. Now, how do you see that, Matthew?
I don't know that there's much more that I can add to that. I definitely agree on that. But what I will say is, alongside of the 22, what is it? The so-called 22 master races or whatever it is in the competing
genetic farmers
program. Yeah. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm right. I feel and just see way more than 22, but I realize that's been the term that's been thrown around in the spiritual community. So I'll just say, yeah, there's many, many, many of them. I absolutely agree with that. I think when we look at the concept of the living library, from what I can tell, I think each planet, and I guess what we could call, maybe we'll call it the local star cluster, or, whatever term you want to add to it, our solar system, I think they all have a similar quality. Each of them contains almost like this sort of living hall of records. Some people call it the Akash, whatever term you want to add to it. But I believe that every planet comes with their own sort of record keeping system, their own layers of consciousness. I definitely agree that, the Mantis are one of many beings that are interacting with and using the frequencies of the sort of living Earth consciousness to assist with the ascension process for, everyone that's here. And to me, I think our discovery of such is literally the stage that we're in right now. It's like we are in the human stage of just awakening of consciousness, where we now have access to that on a greater level. It's not that we didn't have it before, but it's like we are starting to realize what is. And so I would encourage everyone to learn to connect consciously with the Akashic records, learn to connect with the own kind of higher self complex within yourself. And I think that a lot of these things will start to unveil themselves to you in your own individual ways. And so anyway, watch out. I could go on and on that, but to me, it all makes sense. And yes.
Yeah, I can make one little follow-up comment on that, is that, it's funny, we're part of a collective and we're part of the one, but we're also having our own experience. And so we get to interact with, whether you think it's 22 or whether you recognize that it's infinite, because it really is infinite, right? I mean, why single out 22? I don't know. But people do. People like to create structure and ideas and, there's this and there's that. Like they like to make rules, right?
Yeah, Earth-based consciousness needs absolutes. We need to have well, how many is it? This number? Okay, cool.
Yeah. But the thing is that, okay, that's fine. If that's what you want to do and that's your reality, then go with it. That's awesome. I think that there's no limit to what we can experience or we can connect to or we can believe, we can create our reality around. And I think it's just, it's up to us. We get to decide. So in a
Well,
way, it's almost like you take it, the mantas are always taking things up 5 levels. They're like, okay, you asked this question about this. It's so specific. Well, take it up 5 levels and look at it from the long view. And they're always looking at everything from the long view. And they'd say,
mhm.
well, from 30,000 feet, does it really matter? It's just like, it's all part of this huge energy system that is intermingling and interacting. And there's, yeah.
Well, so because for me on this, like, because we're not living at 30,000 feet, I'm living at like 5'9", and so that's
Exactly. So you get to
so
have your
that's
perspective.
so this is my experience, and so with the 22 genetic pharma races that comes from like secret space programs and things that have been like the humans that have been working with the ETs
Hmm.
with through our government consciously for years, for decades. And so that's why those have been isolated as the 22. I think there are many more that come in. I've heard of, if you know who John Vivanco is, he's a remote viewer who I love. I think he's so great. I want to get him on the show. But like he remote viewed or and actually he had a connection with, he connected with an ET that come in that was here for the fireflies. It was like, screw the humans, I'm just here because their genetics were related to the fireflies. Like
Uh-huh.
that was part of their genetic family, and they couldn't have cared less about the humans, but the genetics of the fireflies were very important to them. So are they part of the 22 genetic pharma races? No, because they're not invested in the human genome project. And I'm, bringing this up and circling it back because we're talking about sovereignty at that certain point where what I've heard from those, narratives and those stories, of which I'm not directly a part of, right? So it's like, this is what I'm cobbling together and holding against my intuition. And is that like, yep, at this point, the humans are going to be taking charge of their genetics. No more is it going to be the whole thing of the mantis being with you, Jaylene, and then they step back and they're like, okay, now you do it. Like that's the point where we're at on this larger level where it's like, okay, we've been with you, we've been working with your genetics, and now we're going to pull back, and now it's going to be up to you to take sovereignty within that. And I just find it fascinating because I find it being a part of our evolution, and especially with things that have gone on the last 2 years and products being given out that can directly impact your DNA and all the narrative around that. So yeah, if you want to hop in, Matthew, I see you nodding your head. What are your thoughts on all that?
I think I want to work with the ETs that are here for the fireflies. Honestly, I'm like, whoa, that
Me
sounds
too. That
fascinating.
sounds awesome.
I have to be real. I definitely agree with that statement. And maybe I'm just one of a million people doing this type of work right now, and everyone has their own unique focus. But when I've tuned into what I believe to be a number of extraterrestrial frequencies that are interacting on the Earth plane lately, many of them, I shouldn't say many, but there have been a significant number of interactions that just really don't seem that they're aimed at human consciousness at all. And they're interacting with
Yeah.
very different things, very different missions. And then granted, also at the same time, I would say there's a much greater amount of energy and non-physical interaction that's specifically here for us and our soul's journey. And so anyway, yeah, it definitely makes sense. And I don't even know what else I was going to say to that. So I'll pass the torch.
That's
over
all good. What are your thoughts, Jason? You've been so quiet.
Well, I'm taking it all in. I do have a question, but I don't want to skip kind of like the flow.
That's okay.
But I really kind of want to ask about, like, so when you're saying that they're working with you, like with the DNA, right? Like altering the DNA, strengthening the DNA. Is this all for spiritual reasons? Are there physical changes that they're saying that we can enact in ourselves in the current moment? Or is this long term, right? Like my kids. Does that make sense?
All of the above.
both, yeah.
All of the above. Everything. So your DNA is the first stop for the energy that's coming in from around you to then become manifest into the physical, right? And so through the morphogenic fields that are around your DNA, through those strands that are sensitive to the other dimensions, information is coming in, and then it's getting interpreted by your genome, and it's interacting with your genome. And then it's going to create a biological or biochemical output that is going to then shift your phenotype. Your phenotype is what you physically look like, right? Your genotype is the instruction set, and then the phenotype is the physical outlay. So you have genetics that code for all kinds of things that your body's not expressing right now. And then you have genetics that it is actively coding and creating genes. And then you do have an expression that reflects that. So disease is a manifestation of the genetics behaving in a particular way that has energetic underpinnings that creates a physical effect. And so if you want to create different physical effects, or you want to start working with the sections of your genome that we've, scientists erroneously called junk DNA a long time ago. They know it's not junk DNA now, but we know that inside all of the more complex an organism is, the more of that non-coding, let's call it non-coding DNA there is in the organism. So a bacteria has very little, what they used to call junk DNA. A human has tons of it. So the higher you go up in complexity of the organism, the more of that intergenic sequences you have. And so we need to start learning, like, how do I bring about more attributes? How do I bring more of my own innate gifts online through working in those intergenic sequences, not the ones that are the genes? There's only like 20 to 30,000 genes in the body that's active at any one given time, but there's like 300,000 different proteins in your body. So obviously there's a little disconnect there, right? There's a lot happening, and it's not just post-translational modification. It's not just splice variants. It's not all of it. There's other parts of the genome that are also getting transcribed, and we don't know a lot about those, but at any given moment, you can start to energetically interact with your genome and start requiring, creating space for expression of those aspects of you that are coming in from those other dimensions. So Matthew, you mentioned that mantis is an aspect of you from another lifetime of yours, or another dimensional frequency. If everything's really happening in the now, it's just you in another like flip of the slideshow, right? It's just another aspect of your energy field. And if you want to start to bring more of that aspect of Matthew into this Matthew, then you're going to have to work with your genome to allow the frequency of that aspect of you to start to express itself through your physical genome. And so you can do that through making that connection through that morphogenic field around your physical DNA that you're in the here and now with, and start to draw some of that energy to start communicating with your genome so that the output physically reflects more of that, which could become more fourth dimensional abilities. I'll just call them fourth dimensional because it gets outside of the Newtonian laws of physics. More abilities to bilocate, more abilities to be a remote viewer, more abilities to be more energetically sensitive and psychic, more abilities. I mean, these are just sort of the human things that we might think of, but it goes beyond that. It goes beyond into the state of just heightening your multidimensionality, period. Being able to hold your frequency in more than one location at a single time, which is bilocating, but it's sort of beyond that. It's more like integrating your multidimensional self so that you can really hold the frequency of one thing more than one thing at a time, which humans, unless they've trained, we're not really that good at, right? We hold generally one frequency at a time, or we keep our consciousness in one place at a time. If you're in a deep meditation, you can get out of your body and go somewhere, but typically we don't do that. But other beings, they're here and they're there at the same time. And I think humans have a hard time wrapping their head around that. But that's because they don't have that resistance to doing that. So that's just an example of something that you might evolve into being able to do.
But yeah, potentially in this lifetime. That was Jason's question. Did that answer?
Yeah.
Jason?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. All right. Cool. Did you have any reflections on that, Matthew?
Only toward the original question was, is it a now thing or is it intergenerational? And to go back to that, it's both. So anyway, that's all.
All right, right on.
Plus, any changes you make to your genome in the here and now is going to epigenetically pass on to your ancestors, and not just your biological ancestors. So when I go into an ancestry reading with somebody and I'm looking at their ancestors. It includes every lifetime you've ever had on this planet and all of the biological ancestors from every lifetime you've had. So ancestry is really expanded, in my view, of not just the biological history of, what you might see at ancestry.com, but it's really the biological and energetic history of your soul and every lifetime you've had on earth and all of the relatives you had. So if you go into someone's ancestry and you're a medium or a psychic, you might notice like their ancestry looks like you're Asian or you're from a different part of the world or you're from South America. So how can that be your genetics or your ancestry? And it's because ancestry includes also all of the lifetimes you've lived, not just the one, because of that morphogenic field around the DNA.
So do you think that the lifetimes that you've lived, it's not that you're incarnating through a genetic line, which can branch in so many different ways, that you're only confined to that genetic line, but you can incarnate in other genetic lines as well?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was that's something I've had a question for a while. Would you talk about that we're becoming about could you speak to us becoming more liquid crystalline?
Ooh, yeah, I love that.
Okay.
So there's this group that I work with that I understand their names to be the Divinians, and they have shown me that they have gone through this evolutionary process of becoming less and less solid or less and less physically incarnated, and that now they've moved back into this more energetic state. And they brought that knowledge to me because they wanted me to understand that humans are also on the same evolutionary trajectory, and that although it may take, I don't know how many thousands of years for us to get to that place, that we are becoming less physical, a little more liquid crystalline, and that eventually we will become more energetic or ethereal. It seems to be this process that is evolutionary process that beings go through. And then you might, want to play in solid mass again. You might want to be a rock and evolve it. No, it's not like the stages like in some religions, but it's more that we want to play in all different types of energy densities. And so as we evolve and gain more multidimensional consciousness, we're naturally going to become less corporeal, more ethereal.
But how does that translate from being carbon-based to crystalline-based? Because it was something that really caught my attention 2 years ago. And then, I mean, of course, people are going to poo-poo that and say that you got it wrong and whatnot. But what's the transition between being carbon-based to crystalline-based?
Biochemically?
Mm-hmm.
That's a good question. I haven't really thought about that. I sort of just took the concept at face value and just thought, yeah, because it happens so gradually.
Okay.
So you could say, what is the process of a cliff being worn away by the ocean? Every little grain, just a little grain here, a little grain there.
Or coal turning into diamond, I suppose.
Yeah, it's just this gradual process. It's not fast. These things don't occur. They can, I think, occur to beings rapidly in a but that's not the norm or sort of what is probably going to happen to the masses. Just like there's one-off mutations that cause, big physical shifts. But in general, I think that it's a long, slow process of erosion and recreation. Mm-hmm. I don't know. What do you think, Matthew?
Oh, as far as the process of carbon to crystalline,
as humans, is that something that you see? Like we're gonna have a crystalline matrix instead of a carbon matrix?
Oh, absolutely. I think that's part of the sort of scheduled changes for Earth beings and Earth-based consciousness at this stage of our journey. It's that that's part of the ascension journey, part of the dimensional shift. It's even affected by the way the poles are changing their like placement on the globe. It's definitely a thing. I think it's just part of the gradual occurrence that's going to take place, which does mark kind of like the raising in vibration and the changing of density of the physical human container, which And I guess the thing that I'm going to say might even sound kind of like, whatever-ish, but it's like, it's kind of one of those things that I'm just observing now. And it's almost like you'll just see it like, yep, that's happening.
Yeah,
You just kind of notice
exactly.
like, yeah, that's, and so the sort of why around it, or the exact
How?
symptomology of that change, I think, takes a different form for every different ensouled being, and how their evolution process is going and all those things. But by my understanding, it's a fact, it's part of, but it's a thing that's meant to happen right now. So as far as I can tell, we could say that most of the organic life, or maybe all of it, who knows, I try not to do absolutes, but the majority of organic life on the earth plane is going through a similar carbon to crystalline based frequency shift. But I just think it's part of the schedule, of earth changes. I could definitely be wrong, but
We could all be wrong, but does feel like that. I would say all my little spidey senses tell me that that's the direction we're moving in.
Yeah, and that's how it felt for me too. I felt like in alignment. That felt like a yes to me when I heard that as well. So it's good to explore that here.
Mhm.
I kind of want to then just talk about the elephant in the living room, just so you can give both of you can give your perspectives on that and understandings of it, because there's the reptilians who are working with the mantis that are there for more for domination. And I mean, I hear that narrative in this realm not too infrequently. Like it's one of those things where it's fairly common to hear. And I'm
Mhm.
wondering, what is your, and what I say is like, oh, well, people are people, mantis are mantis. There's going to be some who have this agenda, some of that agenda, like that's just the spectrum. But I don't want to put words in your mouths. What's your understanding of that, Matthew? I'll start with you.
my understanding, and it's constantly changing, so catch me on another day and I might have a whole different viewpoint. But I have noticed that the form of the mantis being is very, very common throughout the earth, or throughout the galaxies, just like physical human forms are very common, reptilian forms are very common. It's one of the templates of life that gets spit out by our universe. And just like with people, I'll just say it, you go to the right place, meet a person you've never met before. They could be an amazing person, or they could be a total asshole. And it's the same thing with non-physical beings. It's all based on like where their alignment is, who they're working with. There's going to be so many different types of mantis kind of races that it's like us on earth, we haven't even heard of them yet. And they could be, some of them are really good, some of them are really crazy. I think we're at the stage on earth where we're coming to realize that like every example that we see of a race or a being or a form of consciousness is really, it's just the tip of an iceberg. There's so many of them. There are countless numbers of these non-physical human races. And so, I hear people say, how, in fact, I don't know, somebody literally wrote this on my Facebook yesterday. They were like, how could you trust insectoid consciousness? And it's like, well, how can you trust human consciousness? You know what I
Exactly.
mean? It's like, how,
Taking a look at humans lately.
it's like, how can you trust? Well, there's a million, and it's
Yeah.
really all about your alignment, your frequency, what you're holding. And so I think I have observed there's a number of what we might call mantis or insectoid beings, or factions or forms or races are very closely allied with some of the darker groups. The crazy thing is, as far as I can tell, and some people are more tuned in with Mantis Collective. Maybe Jaylene has a better answer, but I see them as indifferent to moral outcomes. They just don't care. It's
Yeah.
not a right or wrong, bad or good. It's not a, part of us are doing evil work and part of us are for the light. There's not a differentiation. And I guess if you want to get super technical, and I'll shut up after this, if you want to get super technical and go turn toward the law of one, they say it very specifically. The law of one blinks at neither the light nor the dark. It is available for all. And so you're going to get every different form of them, manipulative ones, beautiful ones that are all into the light. Some of them are, just here to steal your chi. Who knows what it is, but they come in many forms. So anyway, with that, I'll stop.
It's great.
No, I think that's very well said. I totally agree with you. And the times that I have asked them, the why, and because I've heard those stories as well, they would say, do you trust this is what they literally said to me. Do you trust every human? Is every human good? Do you think that, it's not the same just because we're multidimensional? Yeah. Or that we have a better purview of how to work in the multidimensional frequencies. So yeah, in a lot of ways, every being is on its own path. That's what you get. It's called sovereignty. You get to be an asshole if you want to. It's called sovereignty. You don't necessarily want to choose to do that, but if that's your choice and you want to play with that for a while, that's your choice. But I think that, like you said, Matthew, it's up to us to choose who we spend time with. And I'm sure a lot of people who have been abducted and been on ships and seen a mantis there would have said, I did not choose to be here. This is scary. But that doesn't mean that somewhere in your experience as a soul, you're not trying to work out, finding your sovereignty or expressing your own value or self-worth. That there's something there for you in that dynamic that you are exploring as a human. And that's your journey and your journey of healing and your journey of expansion for you to understand. The other thing, though, I would say is that they would very manufacture. We know that they're genetic masters, and we know that they're very good at that. So if you're going to conduct an abduction program, you're going to have a geneticist on board that's going to make sure that that sample is treated as it should be, and that it gets to where it needs to, and that that sample is not wasted, and that it does create more life somewhere else. So they are geneticists, and I think they're pretty indifferent about all of that, and that we do attach a lot of meaning to our sovereignty, or to having the perception that we are not sovereign, and that someone could take that away from us and have something happen to us that is outside our our ability to reject, or that we don't want to happen. And so I think that they're, like you said, very unemotional about it, and that if there's a job to be done, and they're doing it. Now, I don't feel like the ones I'm working with are in that camp. Meaning that I don't feel like they have ever been in cahoots with the reptilians, but they would also very matter of factly tell me, yes, that happens, and yes, they're mantis, and yes, they're doing a job, and no, I'm not upset about it. So, yeah, it's kind of like that.
They're not like warring factions of mantis. They're all just like, this is what we do. Mantis for hire, geneticists for hire, in a way.
Geneticists for hire.
Where it's like, you're working with the livestock. What are you doing with the livestock? And that's maybe more of the vantage point. Because if they're working with the genetics, but the genetics and consciousness are connected.
They are. They are.
Can you explain that? How are genetics and consciousness connected? I know that's a big question, but
well, no, it's just exactly what I've been talking about. How the DNA is not just physical; it's also energetic. So our consciousness is energy, right? Consciousness is energy. It's our energy footprint here. It's our connection into our soul. It's our recognition of what we are on many different levels. So, of course, your genetics are tapped into consciousness because it's all one big package deal, right? We're not separate from that. Our genetics are not separate from it.
Your consciousness and what you're able to access within your greater consciousness is connected to, and your genetics are the door to different aspects of your greater consciousness. It's like the library doors to different rooms.
It's a good way to put it. Yeah, they've always told me, and I didn't quite understand it. I'm starting to understand it better now, but they always told me that our DNA is like a portal into our consciousness moving into other spaces. And so, yes, you can think of it like doorways, and different parts of our DNA, or you could say the different morphogenic fields, or the whole field, there I go again, categorizing semi-human. But yeah, our access to different states of consciousness happens through the morphogenic field around our DNA.
So then let me just say this, since there's a lot of fear, and I've certainly within my own experience of getting certain products that were developed over the last year. So we don't get censored by what Matthew calls the AI gods. So there's a lot of fear. I've been like, my body is like, no, like, and other people are like, no, it's fine. Like I'm not going to allow that to impact me negatively. But I'm wondering what both of your takes are on the products that were introduced into our bodies, or, very forcefully, like a very specific agenda to introduce us into our bodies. What are each of your takes on that? You want to start, Jaylene, and we'll flip over to Matthew.
Okay. I don't like talking about this for obvious reasons. And again, I think probably because I spend so much time with the mantis, I have a very unemotional response to that. And that is that, everything that I've worked with them on and that they keep taking me up to the big view of it. And their opinion is that we're making a way bigger deal out of this than should be made out of it. And that, again, they point back to us working with our genetics individually and directly. And if something comes into your body and then you have all this energy around it intercalating into your genome and changing your genome in bad ways, well, then absolutely, mister, that is what is going to happen when that molecule goes into your body. But that's not my belief. When that came into my body, I was like, it's not going to do that. And it's not going to create physical effects that are going to in any way hamper me or shift my genome in expressing itself in ways that I'm not in agreement with. So I had a very conscious experience with it. I consciously, allowed it to come in because of other things I wanted to do in my life. I wanted to travel a lot and I wanted my life to stay the same way. And I have very third dimensional desires of things that I want to do while I'm here. And so that worked for me. And I was in agreement with them that it was safe for me. And it is not the case for everybody. I don't think anybody should do anything that doesn't feel good for them. That's period. And they would say the same, that if you have anywhere in you this belief that it's going to do something bad to you, then you're going to start to see these side effects coming up. But if you take a very active role in the way that something moves, anything, like this is just one thing. This is just the tip of the iceberg. There's going to be lots of other things that you come across. And by the way, you are actively and always coming across toxins in your field all the time. It's in their food supply. It's in the water you're drinking. It's in the air that you're breathing. So your body is processing other toxins that are going to probably have more effect on you than just that one product. But everybody's really focused on that product. But we need to be doing a lot of energetic maintenance around our genome just because of all the toxins in our environment, especially in the United States. The United States is like toxin laden. Our food supply is really toxin laden. And so I would focus more of my energy on detoxing my genome and my body energetically because of all of the stuff here versus worrying about that so much and, constantly rehashing it.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Mr. Matthew?
Yeah, thank you. That was a lot of really good stuff. I guess the sort of question was around what do I think about the sort of process of forced kind of whatever we're referring to it right now and how that would alter our DNA or our genetics, just so I know where I'm.
Yeah, so the question is basically, how do you feel about the product that, was really strongly and punishment if you don't take it, then you can't travel, you can't do this,
Right.
You can't do that.
Yeah.
So how do you feel about that product and our sovereignty and being able to decide how yes, I take it in, I'm sovereign. No, I don't take it in, I'm sovereign. Like, what is your understanding of that?
Yeah. Okay, cool. I love that question. Wow, how much do we say? How much do we not say? I can tell you this much. It is nothing happens in the Earth game at this stage by mistake. There are no mistakes. And so some of us, at least what I've been shown, is some of us are making a timeline choice. Some of us are making a concession. Some of us are choosing to follow and sort of go along with the thing. And for some people, it's going to be a death sentence. For some people, it's going to be front loading the next indicated hereditary kind of genetic issue up into the front line so that you can experience that. For some people, I think I just said it, for some people, it's about population control. For some people, it's going to be a very, very different timeline for everyone. Do I think it's a death sentence? No. Do I think it cuts you off from your higher self? No. Do I think it stops you from ascending? No. And I think that human beings are very egotistical to think that we have the ability to design something so deadly and powerful that it could actually cause the human soul to separate from its body. Although those technologies do exist, the current round of what's happening on the Earth plane, as far as I can tell, is a timeline choice. Now, was it a choice that I make? Absolutely not. I think it's one that comes with it a layer of risk and sort of frequency that I, as a professional intuitive, choose not to take in my own life. Doesn't mean that others who do are better or worse. I honestly do not know, because one thing I do know is that we're at a stage on Earth where there's so many different realities colliding at the same time. It's part of what we agreed to go through during this great dimensional shift. And so you're going to be living right alongside, for some people, that, they'll get, some crazy heart disease and drop dead next week. And another person will just be stoked because they can finally go to Australia. And it's, it's not good or bad, right or wrong or evil. Now, what I can tell you is that when I look at the frequency of the mix of human and non-human consciousness that's creating and ushering these timelines, those that made it a worldwide decisionary point, those forces are not what we would call of the light. And they actually do seem to be aiming our populace toward a very negative, controlling timeline. Does it mean that that medical treatment is the harbinger of such? No, because actually, as far as I can tell, there's a whole crazy series of other things that are planned in the next 10 to 15 years that are going to make this game look like, oh, really? I wish we could go back to 2020. Damn, if only we could go back. Remember that, the government was giving us money and we could all hang out and stay home. And it was horrible then. And so I think we're at the tip of the iceberg when it comes to parasitic control. And what we're experiencing right now is just the mere choice points of which way you want to go. And so watch out, I'll rant on it for forever. But I think if you are willing to stay genetically pure at this stage, more power to you. But even if you took the mark, it's okay. It's a timeline choice. There are no mistakes, especially under the law of one. Nothing happens by mistake. So anyway,
well, that's great. I wanted to compare and contrast because I value both of those perspectives, and I think that, again, it's about personal choice and giving people sovereignty and not associating any stigma, blame, shame on either one. We're community, family. That's the thing that's going to get us through. Not like, that. Linda, what's the thing with Dr. Seuss where they're wearing stars? Like, I've got a star, you don't have a star, we have the star.
The Sneetches.
The Sneetches.
Oh, the Sneetches, yeah.
I just saw that yesterday in a bookstore in the window. That's why I know.
That's why you remember it. Yeah. Yep. So we don't sneak each other out. We don't have to sneak each other.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we are actually.
You do you, boo.
That's right.
That's my new phrase. You do you, boo.
Exactly.
So any other, okay, well, let's do this. So let's get your closing thoughts because we are a wee bit over. So Mr. Matthew, what are your closing thoughts and any offerings that you have going on that you'd like to share with our people?
Oh, yeah. My closing thoughts are, I honestly have loved this discussion. I want to say, Jaylene, you have a level or a frequency that really emits from your body. It's very authentic. It's very cool. I've enjoyed having you along for this conversation.
Oh, thank you.
And I really feel like the authentic kind of like Mantis being energy with you. It's been really cool to watch and see. And I'm just honored to be here and be part of this discussion with everyone. I think that for me, the Mantis beings were literally the first ever conscious extraterrestrial experience I have ever had. And I think they opened the door for all kinds of other amazing things. In a weird way, I consider myself a little bit of a Mantis being, or that's one of Matthew's primary forms. And so to me, it's a thing that's very, very near and dear to me, but it's also a thing that I acknowledge is constantly changing. And based on what angle you look at it, it's going to be a very different form and a very different frequency. And there's going to be all kinds of different feelings and emotions and understandings along with it. And so I just take it as like one of the stages of becoming and like realization of self on Earth. And so to me, I think to continue to have these conversations around certain beings and, the frequencies and how they interact, I think it's one of the best things that people can do to help generate those experiences for themselves. And I guess one of the questions that hasn't really been asked here today, which was always a question that I asked when I watched these shows, I'm like, well, how do I have those experiences for myself? What do I do to come in contact with Mantis beings? How do I start that process? And if you are one of the people that's asking those questions, there's a million ways in order to sort of begin that chapter of your life. But I know for me, those experiences began when I started honestly detoxing, clearing heavy metal residue from my body, healing the inner child, really, really working on the sort of shadow elements and the darkness within me. For some people, that seems like a cheap or like really, you're saying that's how you start having mystical experiences? For everyone, it's different. For me, that was the gateway into those experiences. So I say heal the heart, heal the human body, heal your spirit. And it's like the other aspects of self will start to show themselves to you in this human human body. And so, or this human life cycle. And now, you know, how you do that is up to you. But anyway, finally, what do I have coming up? Well, we do a bi-weekly show over on my channel, the School of Multidimensional Intuition. It's kind of bi-weekly. Sometimes it's weekly. We are doing a show tonight. So anyone that wants to hang out, we're going to be going live around 6 p.m. Eastern over on the School of Multidimensional Intuition YouTube. And it's just more of me ranting about weird, wild, crazy stuff. For those that are seeking a entirely different level or just a different frequency of energy clearing, of intuitive readings, of just modeling a process for connecting with spirit, private sessions are the heart of what I do every single literal day. And so you guys can find me at rememberyourmission.com. And so, yeah, YouTube, rememberyourmission.com. Oh, and then finally, we got a Patreon group called the Blue Flame Collective, which meets every month. And so you guys can find us there. With that, I'll hand it over to Jaylene.
That was great. And I didn't want to say real quick, just to not, like, the emotional healing process, you know, that's not the cheap process. That's not the small process. People want to bypass that. Like, just send a ship. Like, no, do your friggin' work.
Just do a bunch of ayahuasca, bro. That's all you gotta do. Just do some DMT and you'll meet the, that's, yeah.
Then you can have a nice PTSD experience because you didn't do your inner work. Anyway, so, all right, Miss Jaylene.
Hey, so thanks so much for having me, you guys. It's been really fun to talk about all this stuff. I absolutely love it. And Matthew, I want to extend also my gratitude to you and thank you for your nice comments. And I agree. I really enjoy your energy. I definitely feel that same vibe from you. And it's to me, the Mantis are like family. And anytime I'm around another family member, it's so comfortable, right? It's like meeting someone that you already know. And I love that. So I really appreciate that. And this has been wonderful. And I think my closing comments to everyone, and I think you brought up a good thing because I used to say the same thing, like, how come I'm not, what do I do? And it really is about lowering that resistance, that we all have this energetic resistance within us that keeps us sort of locked into different ideologies or thought processes or beliefs. And when we lower that resistance and when we allow our heart to really amplify the signal of our energy field, then it's much, much easier for you to interact with other beings of higher frequencies and in different dimensional spaces because you're not locked down so much anymore. You're more fluid, you're more crystalline, right? You're more able to be flexible and move into other dimensional frequencies. And so that really is the first step. You got to do the work. Sorry, peeps, you got to do the work. You got to get yourself to the place where you can open up and be available energetically so that you can receive the signal that they're there. They're all around us all the time. It's not that they're not there. You may not be perceiving them because your energy field is not allowing it, but they're there. And I really want to leave everybody with the message that is really clear. I asked the Mantis what message they wanted to relay to everybody every day or today. And really every day, I think that's well said, is that they really want us to understand that we are in this time of personal responsibility and that it really behooves all of us to take a very hands-on approach with our own genetics right now and a very hands-on approach to recognizing that no one can take away your sovereignty from you, that you are a sovereign being, period, and that it's time to start acting like a sovereign being. And that means not giving away our power to somebody else by allowing somebody else to make all your decisions for you, but make your decisions yourself and do so in a conscious and active way, meaning you're engaged in the process and you're aware of what you're doing so that things aren't happening to you and you can't later say like, oh, that happened to me and I didn't want that to happen to me. I wasn't aware. Well, no, you're aware on some level. We're always aware. We are multidimensional sensory beings. You know, your nervous system has got you high wired into everything that's going on around you. You may not just be paying attention. So they say pay attention and get involved with your genetics and start to work with it energetically and start to express yourself, manifest yourself physically in the way that feels good to you and feels in alignment with your journey, and really tap into what your journey is and be engaged in the process of expressing yourself in a way that feels good to you and that feels like it's in alignment with where you want to go and what you want to expand into. We're always expanding. No one ever gets knocked off the path by any other being completely. You just might take a little side trip. You know, the river is always flowing in one direction, but you might get caught in a little eddy here and there, but you're going to always be moving down the river just like everybody. And they always say no soul left behind. It's not like the cool kids get to go. No,
Right.
everybody is moving down that river. We're all flowing. I don't care if you're the, lowest vibrational being or the highest vibrational being, everybody's moving in the same direction. They might move at different rates at different times, but everyone's moving in the same direction. And that's an expansion, right? So what I have going on right now is that I'm about to start teaching a DNA course that I'm really excited about. I really want to talk to people about the history and the magical function of our DNA and how we interact with it and how you can interact with it. I want to teach people, the Mantis want to teach people how to learn how to take charge and work with your DNA personally and actively, so that you can start to not only open yourself up to new experiences and bring abilities online, but also clear away some of the muck and the mire that might be hanging around your genome from all your experiences as a human or a non-human, anything that's sort of coming into your, and taking more ownership over that morphogenic field, so that you, if you do meet another being that doesn't have great intentions for you, that you can actually have some sort of control over your emotional field and your genome, so that you don't have to go with that being, that to get into a place where we can learn mastery over our energy fields and our genome, so that we can choose how we want to behave and how we want it to express itself, versus it just sort of happening randomly to us, right? It doesn't need to be like that. And that's really their message to us, that you're in control, you get to choose. Choosing is an act of sovereignty. You are a sovereign being, period. So start choosing and don't let someone else choose for you.
Speaking of messages, great message. Are you going to come back in August for an update with the Mantis? You were
Oh,
in
yes.
France.
I
People
know. I took a little
commented they
break.
missed you. They were like, "Where's the July?" I was like, "Someone's in France. So sorry."
Someone's drinking rosé and not listening. True story. Yeah, no, I'll be back in August with another update from them to see what they have to say. Sorry, I forgot to mention too, I also do sessions too. I love that too, Matthew. I love working with people one-on-one. It's one of my favorite things too. So you can find all that on my website.
Goody, good. And we got all their links down below, so people can just and maybe Matthew could have Jaylene on his show, because Matthew's got an amazing show. So it might just be a fun little crossover.
Yes, and
Most of
Matthew,
my
I'd love to
guests
have you
actually
on my
come
show,
from-
because I meet with a group 3 times a month, and I would love to have you come speak with them too.
I'm
So that would be
always
awesome.
available. So
Although you say you don't show up in other vortexes, so
I don't that much. I think it's just because I think I have a very particular frequency. I hate to say it at the end of the show. It's not perceived by many. So people will walk right next to me and they will not see me. But if you're in the same frequency, you will literally, oh yeah, that guy's here. So
I have that phenomenon
congratulations.
too.
Thanks for doing it.
I wonder if that's a Mantis thing. I have the exact same thing.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a blessing or a curse. It's aided me greatly, and it's also led to great waves of unacknowledgement. But I seem to be safe no matter what happens. So maybe it's a good thing.
I hear you. I'm with you.
Yeah. Mantis cloak.
For real. That's
For real.
Anyway.
All right, I'm going to toss the mic over. Thank you so much, both of you. Love you so much. I'm going to toss the mic over to Miss Linda so she can start our gratitudes as we roll out.
Absolutely. And right before you guys were talking about victimhood, I heard, so I'm going to repeat it, victimhood versus choice is an active internal process. And that came through right before you guys started talking about victimhood. So again, synchronicities happening during this. So with that, we've had such great conversations in the chat. Thank you everyone for being in the live stream chat. Love to hear that. Continue the discussion in our Facebook group. All the links for everyone are down below, and check them out. Check out their upcoming events, and check us out next week. And with that, Kat, why should they check with us next week? And when should they check with us next week?
So next week we are bringing back. Oh, I'm gonna click us into. I'm sorry. I'm gonna click us into gallery view, Brady Bunch mode, so that way people can see us all at once here. Next week, Paul Wallace is coming back onto the show. Paul Wallace, we got to have him a month and a half ago, I think. It was a while ago, but wow, that guy is great. So he's going to be talking more. I got through maybe like this many of my questions that were like, this long. And in terms of the our true history and what's being uncovered, not just through archaeology, but through religion, through words, through all of our documented history that has been sort of cobbled together and distorted, and he's been able to pull it all apart and see where the threads really go and where they come to and go to, and how they're impacting us to this day. So super excited to have him back on. And that's going to be Sunday at 4 o'clock Pacific and 8 o'clock Eastern, I believe, is how that works in the time zones. But please join us then. And it is Sunday, 4 p.m. Pacific. So with that, thank you everyone for being here. I am so grateful that we got to have you today. It was great. We send our love to Jenna. The conversation between the two of you, though, powerhouse conversation, so rich, so good. Maybe Jenna may not have gotten a word in edgewise because there was so much there to explore with us here today. So, but anyhow, let's wrap it up there. We are 17 minutes over. So we love you.
Oopsie.
Take care of yourself. Be good to yourself. Be kind to others. And we'll see you next week. Bye, everyone.
Bye.